The internet is a massive part of all of our lives. Have you ever stopped to wonder whether there's a large group of volunteers putting in their time and effort to help make it all work?
I got involved with Apache from its very first day. This thing called the web in 1992 felt extremely disruptive, not only fresh, not only interesting, but like this could be the foundation of something big. And it was addictive to be a part of that. And to make all this work, we're using all the web software of the time. There was a web server from the University of Illinois called the NCSA web server that seemed to do a pretty decent job. And like all internet software at the time, you got the source code to it. And the presumption was that if you used it and you found something wrong, or you wanted to add a feature and you coded it up, well, why not just contribute it back, right? Why not? I mean, why keep a bug fix to yourself, right? And I found this amazing community emerge of other people contributing, of other people fixing bugs and adding features. And it wasn't like somebody from this institution, somebody from that company, it was individuals, it was people.
I was introduced to Apache by Brian Behlendorf. It was back in 1995. I was doing a PhD, working on a robotic telescope, and I was controlling it via the internet. And so at the time we were using the NCSA web server, and we had some issues with that server. So I created a number of patches to kind of get it to work really well with the telescope. And as part of that, I'd found some security issues and fixed those as well. And so having met Brian, he as a fellow web administrator, I'd sent him those patches and he said, hey, you know, we've got a group coming together who are all sharing patches based on that web server. Would you like to join it?
I was supposed to analyze satellite images about algae, about green stuff in the sea and see what the sea temperatures was based on satellite pictures. But that data was really sort of like cumbersome to process. So I was in a lab in the north of Italy of the European Commission. And it was just not working, it was difficult. But I'd seen a few years earlier at CERN, at the particle physics lab, that there was this wonderful data server, which kind of like what we call a web server today, which made a lot of this sort of like data processing easier. So like I found this community around me of people like-minded. And actually that went on quite pleasantly and really rather nice for a little while. But then suddenly sort of like things started to change.
So one day an email goes to the developers list for this NCSA web server from those student developers at the University of Illinois going, hey guys, sorry about this, but we're not going to be working anymore on this web server software because we've all gotten jobs with this brand new company called Netscape.
So we were left dependent upon this open source web server that no one was coding, no one was maintaining. And we realized that we were in a pretty precarious position.
And in a rare kind of fit of foresight, we decided to look at the copyright license on the code. And it basically said, here's this code, do whatever you want with it. Just give us credit when you take it somewhere else and you create a derivative work from it. And don't blame us when it breaks. And this don't blame us when it breaks thing, you know, and you're on your own, but good luck, but here's code, was this amazing insight. It was like, all right, we could do this ourselves.
We were lucky enough to collect a group of people over a mailing list to coordinate and consolidate some of the patches and the ideas and the features and the improvements we wanted to see in the old NCSA web server and use that to create the Apache web server, sort of like a phoenix rising out of the ashes.
We decided to inherit that same thinking, that same mentality of, well, let's work together voluntarily. Let's combine our efforts. Let's do this at a new home. And we needed a name. We just called it New HTTPD at first. And I suggested the name Apache, partly because, you know, the most web technologies at the time that were launching were being called Cyber this or Spider that. And so as kind of a protest vote, we adopted the name Apache.
The pieces of code that were being given to it by this group of people, they were called patches back in the day. They're called pull requests now, but back then they were called patches. And so it's Apache software because that's a pun on the fact that it was made up of patches, which I love.
Microsoft owned 95% of the desktops. All they had to do was come up with a browser and a server, and if they owned both links, well, it was kind of game over.
Back then, we were really leading a fight, leading a battle against the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt of what open source was about. There were a lot of very, very large companies just not really familiar with what open source was about, and some very, very strong, powerful companies who were very antagonistic towards it. So for us, creating a software program, creating an open source foundation, and creating knowledge about what open source was about was sort of like a trident battle.
The idea that we won in this fight to make open source the de facto way that people develop software, it was such a long shot for so long.
The Apache web server became, within less than, I think about 6 months or less than a year, the most popular and widely used web server in the world. And it took market share away from other commercial products. And obviously some of these companies didn't really like that.
Apache its market share exploded, right, to over 65% of the websites out there running Apache. I mean, everybody from the Vatican to the FBI to all of our websites. And then finally, at 98, we also started to get knocks on our door from certain large companies, in particular IBM initially, but also starting to hear from people like HP and Sun and even Microsoft, who started to notice not only the market share numbers, not only their own efforts to build web server technology not cracking the market share numbers, and also realizing that this license, this copyright license we used, was something that they could work with. And when we had conversations with these companies, saying that, we're just a bunch of dudes on a mailing list was not good enough. Not good enough for them, not good enough for us. And by summer of '99, we had started the Apache Software Foundation.
So when the Apache Software Foundation was formed, I really saw it as an umbrella of one product. And I never really imagined at that time there would be hundreds of projects that would want to come under the same umbrella.
In the older days, the easy statistic was to say that 9 out of every 10 websites that you went to were powered in some way for the Apache web server. But these days, entire new industries, big data, things around machine learning and processing and streaming, these all exist in the Apache Software Foundation and are the open source projects that drive those entire industries. So it's really hard to say just in any one statistic anymore how large the foundation has become. With more than 300 projects, it's really hard to wrap your head around the whole thing.
I never leave the home without this helpful t-shirt. So the projects: Hadoop, Mahout, Geo, BigTalk, CloudStack, Spark, Cassandra, Pig, Hive, Zookeeper, Accumulo, Scoop, Flink, that's a big data ecosystem. Java projects: Maven, Dart, Redis, CouchDB. CloudStack is pretty cool. HTTPD, the one that actually gave us the Apache Software Foundation. Yeah.
So sometimes it's really hard to understand the impact of a lot of what we're doing at Apache, right? Because it's not something that you see on television.
People depend more on the ASF than they realize. A lot of the time, when you think you're just accessing a website, you're using ASF software somewhere in there.
It's kind of like, it's sort of like everywhere and everything, right? It's in every mobile phone. How the banking systems fit together. I mean, if you order a cab or if you order a meal.
Open source is everywhere. It's in your fridge, it's in your telephone, it's in your car. I have an electric bike. I'm sure there's even some open source software in that.
We have someone who works at a national space agency who's confirmed that some of the modules from Apache Commons were on a satellite that was sent into space, which is pretty cool that there are Apache committers who've written code running in space today. Well, I hope the satellite's still there.
Control some huge engines and robots.
Apple, who use it as their infrastructure layer for Siri.
Apache Foundation has changed the way we do open source inside of Alibaba and for many developers in China in general.
As soon as there's something internety involved, networked, mobile, a web browser, that will basically mean layers and layers of Apache software to process documents, to process XMLs, to have couplings, to have APIs. I mean, you just name it.
The Panama Papers were analyzed using Apache products. That's huge. NASA uses Apache products in space.
Bet somebody that they've used Apache software within the last hour. And they have. They have. Because not only are particular projects particularly widespread, but the spread of projects is enormous. It's almost certain that they've used some Apache software, not knowing it, not necessarily seeing it, but it's almost certainly there. And it's, unless you've been asleep for the last 8 hours, it's really, really hard to go in a modern technological sense more than just a short period of time without using some Apache software.
When it's something that people can touch and interact with, their phones and their cars, and you realize all of that's open source software, and it's like, wow, okay, this is something that's truly changed the world.
So what is open source? Why is open source so important to the Apache community?
Everybody being in a large sandbox. And instead of everyone going off to different corners and sides and building their own little castles, all those people in that singular sandbox are actually working together on a really, really cool big sandcastle.
Interestingly enough, that sandbox analogy was actually given multiple times when we still had a lot of discussion about what open source even means, right?
You come from a commercial background and you think about open source, you think, well, hey, it can't work. But it does.
They just don't understand at the moment that why is somebody giving away something that is free but is way better than the things they have to pay a lot of money for.
We give away software that is really cool and does amazing things. Why do we give it away? Because it's what we do. Because the impact of open source is that openness, the ability for anyone to come and use and consume and contribute.
And so when I first sort of joined the project, it was sort of like, who's in charge? There's nobody in charge. Who's going to tell me what to do? Nobody's going to tell me what to do. You choose what you think is of value to the projects and the community.
So there's a lot of sort of non-technical education and awareness that goes on and needs to continue going on so that the people who write the checks and the people who run the businesses can understand what open source is.
It's difficult, I think, for a lot of older people, especially the more corporate type people, to understand why a really talented programmer who could command a lot of money by doing their work for companies would be willing to volunteer their time to do it basically for free. I mean, why would you want to do that? And for me, it's an acknowledgement of what I see was the old hacker culture. I mean, developers, coders, contributors are artists. And I think all artists want to share the results of their craft. They want to work with aligned people. They want to hone their skills.
There's sort of a pride of art when you rise from simply being a coder that makes something work to actually creating a thing of beauty. And it may seem a little pretentious, but it is still a great desire. When I create something, I want it to be beautiful as well as functional.
If everyone knows that I did a particular piece of code, then I'm a lot more careful to make it good. And if it's just something that's going into a proprietary thing that no one ever sees, then I can be a little sloppier.
We also have to work with lots of closed source software, and it just sucks. It makes our job harder. It's hard to debug, hard to reason about. You don't know what's going on. And with the Apache Software Foundation, you can look at every piece of code, and that makes things much easier. And you work together with a bunch of people who chose these products usually to collaborate, and they weren't forced to do this.
A lot of the software early on that I built, I would put a license on it saying, please use this, I'd be happy to do it, but if you're going to make money on it, come back to me and let's make a deal. And I have to say, that really prevented the use of that software. Later, I decided just to say, I'm not going to fight about it, therefore, why should I argue about it? Let's just put it in a public domain. I had no idea the defects of that, but that caused my software to be massively used. And that really surprised me, that I would get more back by letting go more freely. And then when I found out about the rationales behind Apache and the license and things like that, it really clicked.
It does enable people to use your open source software without giving anything back. And we're okay with that. We acknowledged that at the very, very beginnings, that a permissive license allowed people to use without giving back. But we saw the importance of having that capability because, at least for us, it was better to encourage people to contribute back rather than force them.
You see things like the GPL that are, like these pure open source licenses without any kind of restrictions, right? It's like, other than it's like you can't commercialize it, you can't close source it. The LGPL is even worse, right? Because then now your code is LGPL'd by proxy. And, it's like the Apache license is so open that's going to get people to come in and work on it. And you see that all the time in the Apache community itself.
The license that we have, Apache license, is one of the most business-friendly licenses out there, which enables you to actually leverage that software in all sorts of different ways to create businesses around it. That very interesting combination, that dynamics between builders and entrepreneurs, is that what makes ASF very, very successful. And we need to try to communicate that value proposition to both developers and entrepreneurs.
There are softwares where, they've got these huge communities, huge amounts of, support, not only from individuals like us, but, from big, big companies, using this and feeding back into the community. And to me, that's what it's all about, right? Because I never want to be the smartest guy in the room, right? And when you try to close source something or try to make it just fully open, you're going to drive away those people who want to actually have that sense of community.
It always felt like the most smart people are actually everywhere else, they're across the globe. And unless you keep in touch with the open source communities, you basically don't get to experience all of the innovation that's just out there.
When working with people that are so much better than yourself, you learn a lot.
You work with people that work at Facebook, at Google, developers from IBM, NASA engineers in various projects, engineers from the NSA, and you rub elbows with these guys. And you learn and you grow and you become more than who you would have become if you weren't part of this.
Joining force with open source effort is rewarding. You give a little, you take back way more. So that's really what I want to share, especially with developers or companies in China, that don't be afraid to give, to share. You will get more out of it.
Trust is hard to achieve, especially with people that you've never met. But if you push yourself out of that comfort zone a little bit, the balancing act there, I still believe in 2019, the balancing act of trusting more than you might otherwise feel comfortable doing still ends up with not only better outcomes for you, but better outcomes for everyone.
One of the things that we are really battling with nowadays is just the size and scale of the organization. Growth is not bad. It's the uninformed growth. It's the unconstrained growth.
We realize that at our current rate of growth, we may be in a little bit of difficulty in terms of funding the operations. So the biggest challenge basically is making sure that the foundation can continue to exist as we grow.
We have to make sure that we can keep funding this organization into the future because those communities that we invite to participate in our sandbox, they actually expect quite a bit of support that we are only capable of giving because of the wonderful sponsorships that we're receiving as an organization.
So growth at all costs is a toxic concept. I mean, there's only one organism in nature that grows at any cost, and that's cancer, right? In the modern world, in the corporate world, growth is kind of considered fundamental. It's like, no, if you're not growing by 2% or 20% a given year, if you're in fact shrinking or just staying flat, well, you're a failure. But we don't have those pressures in the nonprofit software world. We don't have to respond to that as Apache. The impulse to grow and to grow to thousands of developers impacted to hundreds of projects like Apache has now has been much more out of a sense of, well, if we figured out how this should work, let's be advocates of that. Let's help other people understand and share what has made things really work.
I'm involved with a program at Google called Apache at Google, which is largely helping Google as an organization contribute to the ASF. I know the story is that it's all volunteers, but obviously most software engineers are paid to do their work. And the way in which they're volunteers is really that they choose to work on projects that give them a chance to contribute to Apache.
Yeah, so we're trying to make a better world, but at the same time, we all need to make a living, so we all need to make money. We've got organizations that need to keep turning a profit or they'll have to shut their doors. So there's obviously conflicting interests there.
Conflicts happen in the software development projects, and sometimes these conflicts relate to the different type of people who contribute. As far as the ASF concerned, it's all individuals, it's all volunteers. The ASF does not pay anyone to develop any software. However, there are companies who pay some of the employees to specifically work and contribute to specific Apache projects.
Currently, we have a sort of a tension between volunteer contributors, people who do it in their free time, and paid contributors, people who are being paid by Google or IBM or Microsoft to contribute to our code and to our communities. It can happen that the paid contributors, just by sheer volume of work, because they have 40 hours a week or more, can reduce the influence of our volunteer contributors and can even push them out. So there's this tension, but our volunteer contributors are the contributors that carry our values. They are sort of the cornerstone that our organization rests on. And we need to find a way to make it possible for them to maintain a certain level of influence.
It can be a bit difficult to coordinate this or to make decisions in a fair way. It's easy for the people who are working full-time to take more space in the project and maybe not leave enough time for the others.
I could just fix stuff, go, and move much faster than people who have just got a few hours at the weekend would be able to cope with. So what I try and do, and I don't always get it perfectly right, but what I try and do is when I'm doing something that I think is going to be of wider interest that people are going to want to look at in more detail, they're going to want more time to think about, then I sort of try and give a heads up. Well, I'm thinking of doing something in this direction. What do you think? Leave it a few days, maybe a week, and then see what the responses are and then add my response. Give people the time to respond to the points that are being made, let them have the space to make their contribution.
We ask a lot of the developers and other volunteers in the Apache community, and ask a lot beyond just writing code. For some people, this becomes their full-time job, and somehow they have to convince their employer to let them do this, right? And that creates a challenge to recruiting a truly diverse community to the project. You'll find there's a lot of us who are white dudes.
One of the things that I'd like to see us improve on is our diversity measures. You can see I'm a woman. We don't have very many women contributing to Apache software. I'd like to see more women contributing to open source software, and I'd like to understand where we're failing there, why we're not attracting women, and what we can do to attract more women.
I mean, I'm used to being the only woman in the room. That's been part of my life for a long time.
Being involved in Apache actually opened my eyes to the fact that there was not so many women in tech. And one of the things that we are really, really keen to do is to try and help bridge that gap.
Women in tech leave the business much more frequently than men. And that's true within the Apache communities as well, I'm sure. And how we examine that and how we deal with that as a community, I think, will have a strong impact on future growth.
I love that we're increasing our active role in trying to reach out and increase diversity. I'm proud to call myself a gay man and a part of the Apache Software Foundation. Back in 2003, when I first joined, that seemed like a scary thing to say out in the open. But today, I have no problems openly saying who I am and being a part of this great community.
It's really common right now for projects to be looking at diversity and inclusion with a more serious eye. And I think it's great that there are people at Apache that are taking up that question again, because it is a monoculture in some regards, and it'd be nice to see it, blossom in 1,000 more directions, which is what diversity has the promise of doing. But we have to be careful not to lose the things that make Apache special. So the word meritocracy, for instance, has not always been popular among diversity and inclusion activists. But Apache is very much something that runs on, shall we say, a do-ocracy. You get more clout in the community by doing things.
In the early days, when there were just 30 of us, 50 of us, 100 of us, it was very easy to communicate the vision and have a shared vision of what Apache was and what success meant. As we grow, we now have 800 members. We have something like 8,000 contributors to our individual projects. And many of them no longer really have a vision of what Apache is supposed to be. They're participating in a software project because it's part of their job or because that particular project is their hobby. But the larger vision of the foundation is at risk of getting diluted.
ASF is now 20 years old. In a best possible world, it'll become 40 years old and it'll become 60 years old. Somewhere in that time frame, none of the people involved at the beginning will be involved anymore. They'll be dead. That'll be true for me too at some point. Sooner or later, there will be other people doing this. Now, I wouldn't want to impose too much exactly what I think or what we think on them, but I would hope that we could communicate what really was good about ASF 20 years ago, 10 years ago, now, to them 20 years from now, so that they can carry that forward, interpreting it as the world is 20 years from now, which may be very different than it is now.
I talked about that meeting back in 1998 where we had all the developers for the Apache web server in one place at one time. And my concern at that point was that we had all the developers in one place at one time. And if something was to happen, some natural disaster, or we all ate the wrong bad sushi, that community would then go away. And I wasn't worried about the code because the code was already on tens of thousands of servers around the world. I was really worried that we'd lose the people who shared the same core values, the same mission. And that's what would have defined success. The project's success is based on the people rather than the code. And that's pretty much what comes about by the Apache way.
A lot of people ask us what the Apache way is all about. It's one of our core principles at Apache. Much like this path that I'm on, it guides us in a specific direction that we like to go. But a lot of people have different ideas of what the Apache way is about. We'll get a chance to talk to some of those people to get their impressions.
The Apache way, it has many versions of truth, and people have different meaning and interpretation to the Apache way.
Apache way is a little bit like Zen. You cannot really put it in just a few sentences. You kind of have to feel it.
It's interesting. If you ask 10 people how they would describe the Apache way, you'd probably get about 11 answers. The Apache way is all about community over code.
Apache way is community over code.
Community over code. Community over code. Code doesn't manage itself yet. It might in the future.
For me, it's all about communication and community. I'm not really sure if that's the right answer.
We say community over code, but it's not something we just make up. It really is the most important part of the Apache Software Foundation is the people.
I know that a lot of people have said things like community over code and so on, but I think it's easier to express it in actual verbs and nouns together. So we as people come together, we have some communal interest. As such, we build a structure together that allows us to work together, that allows us to communicate, allows us to bring in new people, and build software together. Now, this is definitely not the fastest way to build software, but it's a remarkably sustainable way.
If you have a great community, if you managed to build a vibrant, self-sustaining, self-governing community, your code will come. Even if your community started with maybe not the best code base out there, but the community itself is great, you will go through a refactoring process of that code base and arrive at version 2, version 3, that would be much better than what you started with. But the other way around is absolutely not the case.
We focus on everything being done on public mailing lists. So both our clean and our dirty laundry is basically out on the clothesline for everyone to see. But I think that's healthy. We have this fascination with mailing lists, which is very, very old. And why can't you use something more immediate, say Slack, for example? Well, it's not because we are, old-timers stuck in the mud who just love mailing lists. It's because we want something which is asynchronous.
The ASF also is very good at building bridges across time zones through their use of asynchronous communication. For important decisions, there's a 72-hour window where people have time to participate in a vote, for instance. But it's also good at building bridges across time into history. Like if you're wondering today, what happened in the HTTP server project more than 20 years ago, you can still find that out because all of the communication is archived, is searchable, and has stable links to it.
So looking at it that way, it's not mailing lists which are important. It's making sure that whatever communication mechanism, medium that you use doesn't disenfranchise anyone and enables anyone and everyone who has a passing interest to be involved in the communication and see what's going on, to be able to do that in a way that makes them equal peers to everyone else.
Everyone's considered equal. Everyone can contribute. There's no one there who gets to decide because I'm the boss of the project. I decide which feature gets included or which feature does not get included.
Nobody really cares about who you are. It's about what you do.
To me, meritocracy is about building that credibility over time and that the community recognizes you for those efforts.
The people who contribute a lot, whether it's code or other things, receive some rewards. But yet, when it comes time to make a decision, no one of them, regardless of their merit, has a much larger voice than any other.
The people who do the work should have a say in how projects work, and that seems fair to me. There's also the connected idea that merit doesn't expire, so if you did something 20 years ago and earned some right for it, that doesn't expire. I'm not sure if that's always a good thing.
If a committer needs to take a year off to go and do something, then they can come back and they still have exactly the same weight and right to speak in the community as they had before they left. And I think those things are important, and it's a big part of how Apache works the way it does and why it's been so successful.
Consistently, the Apache way makes sure that it does work out well. And that's why companies trust Apache software. The leadership you will find at Apache are the people that inspire others. That's leadership at Apache. We inspire each other, and we're all leaders at some point. The seat just changes.
The core governance processes of Apache are very well documented in the form of bylaws and all that kind of stuff. But figuring out how to broadly educate the world about how to work this way is a challenge for everybody. And all I can say is, as more smart people keep coming into this community, we have a chance not only to help further define that, but to continuously update it. Update it for a world that, again, is much different this year than it was 20 years ago.
We thought a lot about how do we sustain the foundation. Kind of as Greg Stein, had often put it was, think about the foundation living for 100 years. And what did that mean? And it meant growing the foundation and providing a stable base to ensure that success. And the way we did that was the Apache Incubator project, which is how we found the next generation of Apache software projects.
We think that we can teach everyone to be good playmates, basically, and that's what the incubation process is.
All the
let's say, rules and recommendations that exist have a reason to be. And the reason is sustainability of the projects in the future.
If your project is only driven by a unique company, it's not an Apache project. It's a company project. So during the incubation process, you have to show that you have different users from different backgrounds.
I think that the incubation process is a key part of why Apache remains successful. It has to do with dealing with scaling.
Growing this culture, not just imposing it upon people, but helping them understand why it matters and bringing them into the family and establishing those relationships.
To me, it feels that ASF presents this really amazing lesson to the world, which I would love to see spread out, to even schools, universities, right? Because if you think about it, ASF presents a model of collaboration that can not only be applied within corporations. Interestingly enough, by the way, a lot of corporations these days have this notion of inner source, basically saying, well, even though we may not be contributing to the open source, because of the legal reasons or just, corporate reasons, inside of the corporation itself, we will behave, our engineers will behave as though we're practicing open source, right?
So that engineers can stop working in the salt mines of siloed, over-specialized teams and become the full flowering of what they could be, which is collaborative members of a cooperative that creates software.
But it doesn't stop there. You can actually manage to get the same model and apply it to all sorts of different areas of human endeavor, right? You can build your local organization that is trying to enact change, a political change, for example, in a real world. You can build it through the same set of principles that we utilize to build Apache Software Foundation.
It doesn't have to be software development. It could be anything. You could be building a house. When people talk about Apache and the Apache way, they think, oh yeah, software development. But it's not. It's a social way of working, a social way, a collaborative way of doing something together in a way that, you can learn from other people and you get the best of all the ideas. That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of the solution.
Hundreds and hundreds of years where knowledge was used to generate money, and the only success factor in society is how much money is my company making. I think that the ASF has proven that even without making money, we did have a humongous impact in the way in which the world runs.
It would be really cool if people could share without feeling like they're going to lose for sharing.
I came from a bit of a sports background where it was more win-lose type of an environment. Being able to be in an environment where competing with people and collaborating with people actually creates win-win situations has been something I've learned from participating in open source and made me realize that this is how most of companies and humanity should work.
One of the things we're seeing nowadays is that the lessons learned inside of IT as far as how to create successful open source projects, but most importantly, how to create successful open source communities, of which the Apache way is most probably the best example of that, is starting to make inroads in other areas. The success of open source is going to expand beyond IT, is going to expand beyond the software development ecosystem. And so we're seeing a lot of the tenets of successful open source, a lot of the memes of the Apache way transcend the IT community. And I think that's an incredible heritage for the movement we've created.
The use cases that get me excited are the ones that are about trying to address any one of those 260 different sustainable development goals out there, right? If we're going to have a carbon trading market, we're going to need a distributed ledger system to be able to do that on a global scale. If we're going to eliminate child labor in mines or on fishing boats or in other industries, it's going to be through technologies like this.
Fineract is a project that supports microfinance institutions in giving out loans and tracking savings for the poorest of the poor. So it's very rewarding to be able to make these services available to the poor, because if you don't have savings, if you don't have loans, if you don't have remittances, that's money transfers, then you don't have contact to the global economy, and you can't profit when your boat doesn't rise when everybody else's boat rises. In the case of this project, you're connecting the empowerment of the poorest of the poor with the empowerment of the software developers. And you're doing both of them in the context of a community. So there are really wonderful parallels between open source software and microfinance.
Being part of that, it just gives me a great feeling that we've been able to change the world for the better. A lot of our software helps developing countries. The great strides the world has made today in the last 20 years of globalization, with the developing countries growing and advancing and providing better living conditions and better economic advancement for its populations, that's a result of the free software movements, and Apache had a big hand in that.
I feel very strongly the only thing that will save us as a species from our own internal greed and hatred and the distance that we put between human hearts. And I occasionally am chided because I am a very sensitive person and have thin skin, and they say you need thicker skin. Thicker skin puts more distance between human hearts. It allows more space for not like me. It allows more space for us versus them. And that will be our undoing, not just as technologists, but as a species. And we are at a crucial point in our evolution, I believe, where we need to start caring more about each other and less about profit. And the Apache way voices one part of that, I think, in a very powerful way. When we put community above code, that gives us the opportunity to have a place where people can be passionate about solving other people's problems. And that is one element of good empathy.
Teaching people that at the end of the day, what we're really here for is to leave the campground better than we found it. Always create more value than you try to monetize.
This is how I give back to the world. When you're volunteering directly in something local, you are making an impact on the lives that are at the event you're at. But when I volunteer at Apache, I'm making an impact on the world.
Is right now, there's a lot of criticism of the internet community and technology companies and such for, throwing up grand visions of a brighter tomorrow and behind the scenes selling eyeballs to venture capitalists, right? And milking that for profit. I believe there's a lot of people, though, who really genuinely recognize what's wrong in the world and are technologists and want to use technology to fix that.
Trying to predict the future is kind of hard. My normal quote on that is the best way to predict the future is to invent it. So rather than trying to guess where we will go with the Apache Software Foundation, we should instead kind of do the things that need doing right now and see where that takes us.
I hope that, as Greg Stein likes to say, that we're still around in 50 years, that we have found a way to continue our culture, a way to continue to bring on new generations, that we've created a place where people feel comfortable leaving. And that may sound a little bit weird, but what I mean is that I can feel that I can step out of my position and know that we'll still be going strong with a new generation of passionate people.
Being open to the new types of technology and the new projects that are evolving. One of the things that's been really, really exciting about the foundation is that we seem to be a place where a lot of new technology comes from.
We've been at the forefront of creating entire industries, and that's really exciting for me as a technologist, as a big geek myself. I love being able to be part of something that is inventing entire new things that the world's never seen before.
I think that in a healthy world, corporations that benefit from using open source or depending their business on open source should contribute back to that in some form, whether it's through sponsorships or by having employees involved in the projects.
I'm here, what can I do? Well, there's a million things you can do.
I think it's important that people outside the Apache Software Foundation realize that they can become part of the foundation without actually having to code. I don't code anymore. I work on handling security issues. And there's plenty of things you can do within the ASF which don't rely on coding.
Everyone has a contribution to make, right? Whether it's lines of code, of course, but it could also be artwork, or it could also be documentation, or it could be mentoring, or just simple advice.
I build software on my own that is trivial. It has no great value. I do it alone because there is no reason for a community there. But I also build software which changes people's lives, which saves lives, which protects people, which helps people build medicines, helps people build cars, helps people build spacecraft. And that software really does deserve a longer life and does deserve a community around it.
The people in the ASF tend to want to solve problems. They don't go go doom and gloom and fut and worried and oh, it's not working and oh, we can't do anything, oh, it's a disaster, we have to rewrite things. But they tend to think about, okay, how do we solve this?
Everybody's always up to interesting projects and there's always, fascinating things and learning that and kind of like, oh, hey, you're working on that thing. Hey, maybe there's a way I can leverage that.
Apache is really good at bringing people together and letting them work together without companies getting in the way.
You definitely don't need to be a rigid, hierarchical, top-down to get cool things done.
Apache itself has kind of intertwined my life for the last 25 years. Everything about what I am now and what I've done professionally, personally, has been because of Apache.
I found myself Apache Software Foundation. I see, wow, this is my home.
And I wanted to not just trade my time for money. I wanted to do something bigger than that.
It's not only my job, it's also my passion.
It doesn't matter what language you speak, where you come from, but Apache is there to help encourage people from all over the world to continue working together for the betterment of mankind.
If I could travel back in time and tell me a lesson is like, try to get into this thing earlier because it has many advantages.
If you want to be part, just jump in. I mean, it's pretty easy.
So come volunteer and be part of the Apache Software Foundation.
Apache has done so much over the past decades. We expect to continue to do so for decades to come. And we'll continue to serve trillions and trillions.